Judy, thank you so much to have you here. And then after some difficulties with the technology and technique with Zooms, we are now in my virtual gallery and with your artworks and with your virtual exhibition. So I think I would like to welcome you first and tell something about you as an artist. You're American, you were born and work and live in Chicago, US, and you studied at Chicago Art Institute and then started painting and drawings, and you have had participated in many different art shows in museums, for example in Travelways at the Castle Art Museum in Michigan, or the Sedimented in Ukrainian Institute in Chicago. You participate in many exhibitions, also gallery exhibitions. So there is a long list. I just want to mention a few of them. It's a Linja Devening Project in Chicago, Wanderlust, Ohio State University in Ohio. You were a participant in many fellowships. So for example, the Illinois Art Council Drawing Center in New York. And you have told me also you traveled a lot in Europe and in the world. Maybe tell us something about your first, maybe the first main question for me, one of the main question is, how did you start it? When, do you remember any initial point in your life you became an artist or you started your artistic practice?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And the honest answer is I've always been making art. From the time I can remember, I was always drawing. In particular, my grandmother had this beautiful oak tree in her backyard, and I would spend hours drawing this tree and bringing the works to my mom and my grandmother, and they were, so supportive, and they were always very supportive of my. I was very good at drawing, so did that for many years, and I also was making these constructions out of paper. So from very early on, I was both drawing and making 3D constructions. And my mother also taught ceramics, but she did it out of our home. And so I was surrounded by this knowledge that, and had permission to become an artist at a very young age. But I didn't really have a model for how I was going to make this a career that would support myself. So along with making work, my first degree is a Bachelor of Science degree in communication. So I wanted to make sure I could have a job also, like in the real world. So the real world, yeah. So, but I've always been making work, and it's always been about nature. My early drawings, my paintings. So I went to the School of the Art Institute, my second degree, and I went in being able to draw, and I was also making small little 3D constructions. When I decided to move into painting, it was really hard because I had to like stop drawing. Painting is different than drawing, and I decided to use abstraction as a jumping off point because it allowed the freedom to explore with materials and shapes and forms. And so I did that, and all of the references were natural, but landscape, some of them were more realistic landscapes, then also just the textures and the forms and the shapes you see in nature. So what happened was, after graduating with my BFA from the School of the Art Institute, I was always walking and very drawn to the like the winter tree branches where you can see the forms. So I started to collect them and decided, I remember exactly where I was in my backyard. I said, I'm just going to try to make something from this. And so I was using the tree branches as armatures initially from my first 3D sculptures. And I did that for many years, and they now are in big corporations. They were sold. And then I decided to go back for my second degree, my master's degree. And by this time, I'm working specifically with the notion of resilience, trees and tree bark, and the textures, and then really doing a deep dive into forests and trees. And so for the past 3 years, I've been working with this material that I eventually made, constructed myself. It's cast and it's taken off, and I'm also casting resin. So that's the long and the short of it, really. So the lineage, it's all tied together. The connecting points are nature, forest, trees, and walking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's also the title of the exhibition in the virtual
Yeah.
room. Walking. We will look closer to this maybe just in a moment, but I have another question to you. Let me get back to your study time, and then so do you remember something, an initial or maybe something very meaningful for you, a talk or maybe a person you have talked to during your study time, which was influential and maybe also um, gave you some directions in artistic practice? I mean, you have explained that nature and walking in the wood and this environment is very important to you. Do you remember something during your study that was important also and brought you into this direction?
Specifically for professors, that would probably be more of about just support.
Mm.
And at the School of the Art Institute, there's not traditional teaching. They work with students from where they're at and what their interests are, and they try to guide them along that path and then introduce them to historical artists, people who have passed or are currently with us that are working maybe in the same vein as they're interested in. Um, so I think more of my inspiration has come from reading on
Oh,
my own in books. Like I just finished reading this great book called The Overstory. It's by Richard Powers,
ah,
and he's a Nobel Prize winner or a Pulitzer Prize winner. It was a New York Times bestseller, and it really speaks almost to a T to what I'm interested in terms of um, what the forest has to teach us, in terms of its own ecology, its own networking, its ability to provide support to other trees, what happens underground. And so I really find that most of my inspiration comes from either reading poetry or reading books that I'm interested in. I don't really know anyone who's working the way that I'm working. So it's not like I have formed a network or a group. Yeah, it's a little bit out there on a limb, no pun intended, but
that is, I'm glad to know that there is the reading is something very initial for your artistic practice. It's not just to get out and to go and have this natural experience and aesthetic experience from nature, but also this intellectual experience, reading books and then and
yeah,
maybe also probably looking at and experiencing another artworks from another artist. But could you? I think there is something that is for me very interesting. This transition between your work as a painter and your work as a sculptor, and then can we look at one or two of your
sure.
paintings, and you explain us a little bit about or explain this transition and this transformation from your painting work and practice and to your sculpting. So I try to show some of your paintings, and then yeah, a little bit. Oh, now that's it. This is one of your
Yeah,
paintings,
yeah,
and it called self portrait.
yes. So I started a series of paintings that I'm very interested in portraiture that is more abstracted, and
Mhm.
it's not, a realistic portrait. And I also believe that what happens in the head in this area is it's just an interesting place to dwell for sometimes as an artist, as a maker. And these felt this and the other piece that you have in the show are both, they're like silhouettes of trees.
That one.
So from the head up, if you take a silhouette of a tree, it mimics that shape. And so it was a juxtaposition of that shape and what might be considered a human head, or a female head. And it relates more directly just to my affinity for the tree.
Mhm.
And how I feel like we're all nature, all of us humans and nature, and we are very connected to nature. So was this merging of the two. So yeah, instead of painting a tree as my head, I just did more of a silhouette
Oh,
of what
I understand.
it might look like. Yeah.
So this is, but how about the color? It's I see in the first one and in that one they are both from painted 2017-18.
Mhm.
I see there is a you emphasized the red colors, warm colors. Is there any specific meaning for to use exactly these colors?
Yeah, I typically tend to paint whatever the season is. So this was in the summertime and it was warm, and everything was in bloom, and it was you I live in Chicago, so we have four very distinct seasons,
Mhm.
which has become a part of who I am also. And so if it's winter, I usually paint blues and whites and grays, more wintry colors. And so this was painted in the summer. So I guess it could be called symbolic of the
Mhm.
season of where this is coming out of. And also in the summer, the tree, if you look at a tree that's in full bloom, if you just get the silhouette of it, it's
Yeah.
a very full silhouette. Yeah.
It looks also very organic. I mean, the shape is very organic.
Mhm.
It's quite obvious that um, you try to create some kind of a relationship between what you see in outside in the nature and ourselves and our body.
Mhm.
Um, so maybe that is a good idea also to make a step further and progress to your work as a sculptor, because you moved from painting to making sculptures, and uh, you have gave us for the virtual exhibition a series of your sculptures, and then I would really love to know more about these sculptures and how more about the material you're using, more about your artistic or studio practice, which is very important for you. You have mentioned already the work, and the title of the exhibition is also working, and also maybe also more about the relationship, even more about the relationship between the nature, your artistic work, and uh, yeah, and us. So I just maybe go further. One of
Sure.
these sculptures is resilience. It's one of I think which was also was standing at the beginning of this series.
So this particular piece, and why I titled it Resilience, and which is tied into walking, um, when we think about resilience and how we build resilience,
Mm.
which we need to be not consciously aware of, but I think it's an important part of who we are as humans. The first resilient thing we did was learn how to walk. That took many times courage, and you had to have it was building your resiliency every time you took another step. So that it just like in a very basic way of looking at walking, but also walking um, has inherently in it is this: we have to slow down, and which helps us pay attention, rather than, so if I'm in the forest, rather than bike riding or roller skating or running, um, I walk because I can slow down. And also walking in a forest, as a female, um, is not always the safest thing to do. You're constantly aware of your surrounding and who's there and what's going on,
Mhm.
which coincidentally also builds resilience, because when you put yourself in a position of something that's difficult or perhaps even a little dangerous, but you push through it, you push through that fear, you are building resilience. So it's very connected, and on many levels, to what we do. And I happen to love to be in the forest, so um, for many years I just stayed in this tight little circle around the lake, and I wanted to make sure I was close enough so that I could get out of any kind of danger that I might find myself in. And then what happened with the pandemic, because before the pandemic, it was a pretty isolated experience. There weren't many people walking in the forest. But since the pandemic and everything has shut down, you can hardly even get a parking space near a forest. You know, everyone's gravitated to the forest. So, and that was a natural thing. No one was told to do that. You know, that was just like a very natural desire to be out in nature and walking. And it was, you know, it was a really interesting thing to witness this year for me. And so and in doing so, I mean, I was so happy to see it, and I was just thinking, yeah, this is what you do need to do to build your resilience. It calms you down, you know, you're able to process, um, you're in nature, you're breathing fresh air. It's a totally, you know, a different experience than walking in an urban area is not the same thing. Walking in a neighborhood where there's cars and sirens and honking, you know, and dogs barking, you know, all of that is not the same as walking in a forested area. You know, it's two completely different experiences. So that's the genesis of this work. The material, I make this material, the white material that you see. When I started to teach myself how to make sculptures, I was actually in my basement before I had a studio, and I just decided to use whatever I had there. I didn't go out and buy anything, just whatever was in my basement. I grabbed it, and one of them was an old lampshade, and I had yarn, so I wrapped yarn around it, and then I slathered it with this mixture of joint compound putty and matte medium, and I let it dry. And I looked at it after it was dry. I was like, well, I liked it because it reminded me of tree bark.
Okay.
But I had no idea what to do with it. So I left it on this armature for a few years. And I had a show coming up at Linda Warren Projects, and I actually needed some more work. So I took it off the armature and started playing with it. And I've been doing that ever since. You know, so it was just a process of, you know, finding this material that I made, or, you know, making this material, and then figuring out what I could do with it. Could I paint on it? Could I manipulate it? Could I stiffen it?
Mm.
What else can I do with it? Tear it apart, put it back together. So, yeah, and it's, you know, so you've got both the hard and the soft, which, you know, the soft is more about the domestic space. The plaster is more about architectural spaces. And then I also take separate pieces and I fresco them, which is a traditional the oldest
Yeah.
way of working actually. And I enjoy it. And it also references the earliest frescoes, which are the cave paintings,
Mm.
and then, you know, on through the Renaissance. So there's a historical connection to this idea of, you know, either shields or masks, all of which you'll find in either one of those art historical, you know, places. And as far as the forest and I want to just mention this because I think it's an interesting um, way of looking at like the earliest cave painters in the frescoes, where they would immerse themselves into a cave-like situation, which oftentimes, which I did visit in France, mimicked our today contemporary narthex or churches with the sound. You know, they found these places where they could actually create sound and make paintings on walls with what pigment that they had. So they're immersing themselves in this environment, which they also use for ritual, which I do in the forest for walking, and I'm immersing myself in the forest for walking and inspiration. So there is a link there when you're able to immerse yourself into a natural environment.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so
Do you think it's because you have mentioned that since the pandemic began, you have observed much more many people going into the forest and walking there because they needed also to get out to have a more fresh air. This is something that we also need probably, or do you think it's probably obvious maybe that people are spending because of this much more time in the virtual world, and like we are today at the moment speaking to each other in the virtual world, and they need just something different. They need this this relation, create a stronger relationship to the nature and to the outside world, even going to the forest. You know, it's the same situation. I had exact the same experience. I love to go and walk in wood and forests and in this environment. And then I remember it was in April also, and I had this necessity also and inside me to get out and take the bicycle, just ride through the wood and forest, and it's to have this real direct relation and connection to the nature and to the wood, especially to trees. That's it, especially to
Yeah.
big trees. And then exactly at that time, it was already in the past, but in April, May, April, March, May, April, it was at that time that was very, very special. And then I see also these artworks which you are presenting. Um, they are also produced at that time. So during the year, they are also some kind of a production related to the general situation in the world. Even albeit you were already very strong connected and related to nature and aesthetic experiences in nature and artistic experience with nature before that time. But it's probably, it grew and become more strong, even stronger in
Well,
2020.
yeah, I mean, I think it was more validating than anything else because I had been experiencing this already, and then I noticed my fellow human beings needing to experience the same thing. So it was like an aha moment for that.
Mm.
And the titles like this, I do have part of them are titled shields, but the shields are more related to the forest acting as a shield for us. It kind of it does act as a shield. And then the masks were more related to actually not what we're experiencing now with masks, but what we experience when we're finding ourselves outside of a natural environment, more urban, and how, especially in the city, how we kind of mask up. We put on this like very like straight face,
Mhm.
and it's a protection. Um, Emotionally, you don't want to be seen as vulnerable or weak or confused. You have to have this like very strong sort of ambiance about you as you move through the world. So that was more related to what I was experiencing there. But the forms of the mask come directly out of tree bark curling off the tree
Mm.
as it sheds its bark.
Yes.
So that's where the forms come from. And then, of course, they're painted with acrylic or different things that are not natural. So there is that juxtaposition between a natural form and a man-made idea, which is acrylic.
Mm. Yes. Could you and we just look at one of these of your artworks is one of your shields. Could you tell something more about? I mean, the colors are very initial, and there's also the contrast between the left and right side, even from which part you are looking at this. The one is white and the other part is very colorful, and so there are two different parts connected together, put together. Could you explain this structure a little bit more precise
Sure.
or in detail?
The form itself was dictated by the armature.
Mm.
So that came off another type of a lampshade. And the colors, so the left and the right side, I speak more to the transformation that can happen while walking in a forested area. So the more the area that has some of the pinks and the greens and the browns in it, it's more um, it's not calm. There is a lot going on there. It also references walking and trails and roads and different things that you can go on. And then the idea for me, anyway, is this transition between like entering a forested area, processing whatever's happening that needs to be processed, and then moving towards this more white, organic sort of calm area, more of a meditative space, a breathing space, so to speak. And
Mhm.
then the pink in here that you see is actually a frescoed piece.
Mhm.
So, and it's pretty old and cracked up. And then, yeah, so the left side is more of, it's a material exploration. It does reference walking. It references, how we organize and process different things that are happening in our life. And then the right side would be more of a goal to reach, maybe some sort of resolution.
Yes. But if you call them shield or even mask, it is something that for me evoke an idea of protecting or protection against something. So on the one side, you were talking about the relationship between us and nature, and our inside and outside world. But on the other side, there is even this something that we need to protect ourselves. Uh, what is it? Why do we need something like this? You have said, okay, there is a just normal, real situation in the wood and in the forest when you're going as a woman. It's not really safe or something like that. But this is, I think, it's more symbolical um, meaning. This idea of protection and
Oh, protection. Yeah. I mean, it definitely is more than just physical protection,
yes,
which of course, as a female, we're very well aware of that. There's other protections. If you even look at like protecting yourself from too much screen time, you know, social media. There is so much coming at us every day, so much communication coming in so many different forms, that there has to be, I believe, a conscious decision to set boundaries, to limit yourself, to pay attention to what you're addicted to in terms of social media, or there's so many ways that we can find ourselves not centered, where we're just being torn in so many different directions.
Mm.
So um, that is, that we need to learn how to protect ourselves from that. And it does take some resilience, to say, putting up boundaries, saying no, finding time, self-care, going for walks, being with other people face to face, which I think we're all really, really experiencing right now. We call it IRL, in real life. Um, and how we, until this pandemic happened, how we took for granted the notion that we would always see our friends whenever we wanted to, you
yes,
know,
yeah.
and it's been a huge change.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's yes. This one here is, I mean, the structure of that, or what you call this hat, it reminds me also about this the first portraits we have seen. For whatever reason, I see the structure, same structure, and
Mhm.
inside this shape. But this is sculpt. It's a three-dimensional. It's not a two-dimensional. Would you say this is something? I mean, the materials you're using here, same materials like you were using for your sculptures. The other shield and shields and masks, but that one is something special because it is for me also some kind, you called it already had, it is also some kind of a portraiture. It's an individual, it's again a self-portraiture, or is it something else?
I think everything is a self-portrait.
Of course. Yes, if I ask any artist, whoever I would ask, they say we are just experiencing, and we express what we think and what we want to give from us to the world outside. It's anyway in some kind it is self-portrait.
Yeah, and in this particular, what I've been working with a lot is with skin type materials. Um, Tree bark is a skin type of material where we have skin over us, which is protection. And the resin in here comes from a tree. The white material mimics tree bark.
Yes.
Chicken wire is a type of a skin and a protectant, like you could use it around whatever. So part of this is also about layering, or like putting band-aids on things, like covering things up, more protection, more resilience, how we kind of like, sometimes we just keep piling that on, you know. So if you're feeling in the need, you know, you've got something you're working on or it's a difficult time, you know, you try to find ways to work through that.
Mm.
Sometimes it's a band-aid idea, you know, sometimes it's other things. So it's just this notion of layering and building, building.
But it's put on the net. You see this metal, metallic net inside this. So is it just to support the shape, or is it something that you would say it is? I decide consciously to use exact this material.
Yeah, I did decide consciously to use, it's chicken wire. It's from my garden. So after my garden is done, I can take the chicken wire because I can work with it then. Otherwise, it's too hard. And the wire itself, it's been spray painted white, is a reference to contemporary culture.
Okay.
You know, it's not organic. It's very man-made, and it's hard, and it is a support. It is an armature, but I did use it intentionally as a reference
Mm.
to contemporary culture, or you know, manufacturing,
Yes.
or you know, other things that do support us, but they're also, you know,
Mm.
not organic. Yeah.
Yes. So that one is one of these masks, and you have already explained that the shape is coming from curling. So what you observe in threes, and just my reflection in general, also in relation to what you said already or explained, is it seems to me that there is something like a reflection on yourself. So you on the one side you just express this necessity to get out and to experience the world outside in nature and the natural aesthetics. But on the other side, you want to keep your um, focus on yourself and also to reflect inside world and not just only outside. But it's something that's your, so you want to protect yourself on the one side, and you focus on yourself, on focus on your individual and inner life, and on the other side, but stay also open to the world and experience the world and take everything that you could experience and just reflect to this and try it also to progress with it, relationship and connection. So not to just escape the world, but and stay closed inside, but even to see yourself in the nature. I mean, it's a very traditional, modern way to also to express, I would say, a traditional aesthetics idea of um, natural experience and aesthetics, which we know
In the head.
already for a long time. Or I've been knowing this for a long time.
And you know, well, in particular, this form, um, along with, you know, what I use as reference points, which is curling tree bark, uh, gravity is also playing a part in this, because once I have it on the wall, um, it will tend to continue to unravel, and I let it do that, you know, till it gets to a certain point, and then I take it off the wall and finish stiffening it or painting it, or you know, whatever I've decided to do. So I'm trying to let nature itself be a part in the construction of these, so it's not just my hand.
Mhm.
You know, it's also what we experience every day, which is gravity. You know,
Yes.
every day, thankfully, for the most part.
Yeah,
uh,
it's quite interesting because if, when you are talking about the gravity, it is, I'm just thinking about the virtual world, and as the gravity, you're walking is something that you connect you and relate you very strongly to nature, toward to the earth. And then this is something that maybe is another part of our life, which takes place at the moment quite often, and or we spend a lot of time in the virtual world, and it's where is the gravity in our virtual world.
Yes, yes, definitely. And that's why I'm a big proponent of walking, because you do experience that along, if you're on a bike, or, you know, you don't feel that quite the same way. You know, I think it's more about you and the bike. Um,
Sorry. Riding a bike in the forest nearby. Yes.
yeah. So
Okay, Judy, Judy, it's really it's very inspiring. And then when I've seen for the first time these artworks, and I said, this is a very complex structure. I would like to know more about this. And then I see that this is a relation between you and your studio practice too, which is related to forest walking or forest works. And then and I see that there is just at the end it is a portrait of you. Even another way of portraying yourself. um, could you give me some more ideas? Do you have plans for the next year? Because we are standing just at the end of 2020, which was not easy, but also inspiring. And let me reflect about many things I didn't think about before, maybe. But what do you think for the next year? Do you have any plans? Would you like to progress with special artistic practice?
yeah. Well, in my studio, I'm continuing to play with cast resin. I'm really interested in the forms and where they're going to take me. Um, I mean, I'm taking this time. I'm really trying to embrace the quiet right now. You know, it took me a while to get there, but I've really started to embrace and enjoy the more quiet time in the studio. And there's less things to do outside of the studio in terms of openings or, you know, everything is shut down.
Yeah,
So I'm really just taking the time to like do that, do some more reading, research, keep working. I have virtual studio visits and just, you know, staying open, taking things one day at a time. And yeah, pretty
yeah.
much just like everybody else.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. And I
Thank
think
you.
we want to progress with this, and then hope so to see also this not only in the virtual world but also in the natural world. And then we'll see how we define the natural world next year. Judith, thank you so much
Thank you
for
so
the
much.
conversation.
Happy holidays to
Thank you.
you.
Happy holidays for you. And then yeah, see you next time. Hopefully also in person, not only in the virtual world, which is, I'm really glad to have this, because otherwise we couldn't have even this conversation today.
Thank you for everything so much. So appreciate your time and your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, Judith.
Okay, you too.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.